Today I'm on Long Island, no stranger to hurricanes. The atmospheric conditions right now are calm, but if a hurricane were to hit, there's a chance that the whole island could be submerged underwater. Some say that there might not even be enough time for everyone to get off.
Once they get involved in the upper atmospheric jet streams, they do move at a very rapid rate, and that reduces the amount of time that people have to monitor the system, get ready, and activate a plan if they have a plan.
I mean, when the water comes in, there's really nowhere you can go. People have to remember that, imagine a yardstick, 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. That cube, seawater, weighs 1,700 pounds. So imagine that water is moving in. You have wave after wave after wave of these 1,700-pound blocks battering the shore. And it's not just the shoreline. When you end up with a Category 3 hurricane, or God help us, a Category 4 hurricane, those waves are going to go miles inland. And there are actually places that are north of Sunrise Highway that are going to be underwater, and there are a few places where the Long Island Expressway passes over canals and rivers where the Long Island Expressway is actually underwater from a major hurricane.
We're overdue, and that's the message that I'd like to convey.
Long Island is overdue for a Category 3 hurricane. It is because we are working off an expired clock that it's important to know the 411 on hurricanes. According to meteorologist Ross Dickman, there is a specific time of the year in the Northeast that we consider hurricane season.
Our season typically runs from late August until maybe early October up here in the Northeast.
It is during this time period that Long Island is most likely to get a hurricane. If you look at this map, it shows places that hurricanes have hit. And if you take a closer look at the Long Island Sound area from 1851 to 2003, you can see how many hurricanes have crisscrossed all points on the island. This map shows how many hurricanes have passed within 75 miles of Montauk. On average, our local area is impacted by a hurricane around every 15 years. One of the worst hurricanes to hit Long Island was the 1938 Long Island Express hurricane, which was responsible for peak sustained winds of 121 miles per hour, gusting to 186. The peak wave heights were 50 feet, or the equivalent to a wall of water as high as a 5-story building. Approximately 2 billion trees were destroyed. 3,300 boats lost, nearly 9,000 homes and buildings were destroyed, and 700 people perished.
Some folks remember the 1938, but folks that are living here probably aren't old enough or don't remember the 1938 or didn't live in here during that time frame, and it's only in history. So there's an incredible complacency that exists, and one of our roles here in NOAA is to try and educate people that these things have happened in the past and they can happen in the future.
It's not just the water that's going to be the problem. No matter how high up you are, even if you stay dry, if trees come down on your house and trees knock down the power lines, and there are trees across the road so you can't get to work, can't get to the grocery store, you can't get to a hospital. So no one's really safe if there's another hurricane, even if in fact they don't get wet from the hurricane.
Considering most people on the island haven't experienced a major hurricane, in which ways do you think we're prepared for it and we're not prepared for it?
Well, I think New Yorkers pride themselves on being tough. We're definitely tough people, which I think is great. But sometimes you can be a little stubborn when you're tough. And I think the issue facing us now is that are residents going to heed the warnings early enough? And even if they do, because of the congestion around here, are we going to be able to get those people to safety soon enough? Because what happens with hurricanes along the East Coast is they get caught up in the jet stream, so they start moving much faster. Like the hurricane of 38 may have been moving at 60, 70 miles per hour. That doesn't give you as much time. When a hurricane's approaching Florida, we may have several days where we can warn people. For the Northeast, it might be 24 hours, maybe 36 hours. And by then, they'll have shut down the ferries, the bridges, and the tunnels, so you really would not be able to get off the island. You would just have to move inland.
Have a plan, know what to do, listen during the tropical weather season.
You want to have a lot of fresh water supply. You want to have canned goods so they don't go bad. Maybe even right before a hurricane comes, fill up your tubs with fresh water to have another extra water source. Certainly have a generator. If a tree is going to fall on your house, if you know that during a nor'easter that tree is already kind of banging away a little bit at the house, you might consider taking the tree down. And that's really, and plywood. A lot of people will put plywood on their windows, and the average person thinks they're protecting the glass. You're not protecting the glass. What happens is if your windows break in a hurricane, then the air rushes into the house. It actually lifts off the roof, and then the walls collapse. So it's as if the roof is holding the walls and the wall is holding the roof.
Where do people go when they're evacuated, and what happens to those people in nursing homes, hospitals, and jails?
Schools and colleges and universities are areas of safe zones that they will ask people to evacuate to. But you can't force somebody to leave their house, unfortunately. And we even saw that with Katrina, that there were some people who were capable of leaving who chose not to. And again, my fear is that because hurricanes are not that common on Long Island, and because New Yorkers pride themselves on being tough, maybe we might have an attitude that, you know what, we're going to ride this thing out. I rode this thing out in Bob, I rode this thing out in Gloria, and we're okay. But if a Katrina or an Andrew or some storm like that comes, there's really not much you can do. Tough is not going to save you in those cases. It's going to kill you.
Do we have ample escape coastal routes to get off Long Island?
Well, there really are no evacuation plans to get people off the island in general. If you're on the South Shore and you notice those blue signs that say, you know, hurricane or coastal evacuation route, those are more for people who are directly in the path of a hurricane right on the South Shore or on Fire Island National Seashore. Those are the people they want to get inland. But the main population centers on Long Island, essentially, they're just going to tell you to hunker down in an inland, high elevated location and ride out the storm and hope it's not too bad in the days and weeks afterward. But again, think about the traffic during a normal rush hour day. Now imagine a major hurricane is coming and you've got like 4 times the rush hours. So you're going to be in gridlock on highways, bridges, tunnels. So that's why emergency officials are actually going to close these down, because you don't want 200 cars sitting on the George Washington Bridge that are going to get blown off by a hurricane. You don't want hundreds of people in their vehicles on a ferry that's going to be capsized in the Sound. You don't want people entering the Midtown Tunnel when it could flood. So those things are actually going to be closed. You're not going to be allowed to leave in those situations.
With all this said, this is not an apocalyptic outlook for Long Island. Rather, it is a wake-up call. It reminds us that we must educate ourselves on atmospheric conditions, what the qualifications are of the people who give us our forecast, what the forecast means, and what resources are available to the general public.